Any Batman fans here? Here we go. Giddy up now. Any Batman fans? Batman, kid growing up. It was on TV, fantastic show, great show. But there were 3 words that I remember as a young kid from the Batman show. What were they? Pow, bam, and wham, right? Pow, bam, and wham. Pow meant just Batman was in a fight. Okay, that's just what happened when Batman was going. Bam, if you see here, from here, when somebody goes flying on bam. But wham is the end of it, okay? Open your Bibles up to Luke chapter 11. Don't try that kind of transition at home. Do not. We are in a series called Jesus versus Religion within the Gospel of Luke. We're in Luke chapter 11. Jesus has just got done teaching about prayer, and then he had a go around with some of these religious folks and told them that they will not receive a sign, anything but the sign of Jonah. Last week, if you were not here last week, we talked about, I need to do a little bit of a recap of round 1, okay? Recap of round 1 of this, the subtle poison of religion. And what we talked about here as we walked through the passage, and we said there was an invitation. This Pharisee, who's the religious ruler of the day, he's the guy this particular person would be a type of a person who would kind of look down their noses at other people. They were holier, they knew it. Okay, so he went in and he eats with Jesus, but there's something that happened there, and Jesus doesn't wash his hands. And it's not just a normal kind of washing of hands, it's a ceremonial way of saying the sins of the world that I've been out in, and I'm washing myself free from them, so I'm clean. But Jesus walks right by that tradition, and it wasn't in the Bible, it was just a tradition. And he says, you don't have to do that. And what happens is the Pharisee is shocked about that. And so then Jesus, knowing what he's thinking, tells them, you guys got issues. You look really good on the outside, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. Says you need to give that up. And then he gives 3 woes. Now I'm going to say they're pow, bam, and wham. Pow is, dude, you tithe, give a 10th of even the little garden vegetables you're growing, the basil. You dry it up and you measure it with a digital scale and you give it to the 100th of an ounce you give to God. But you're not loving and just. Second one is you love when people elevate you. Oh, Rabbi, yes, I am. I am kind of a big deal, right? They love that. That's the bam. But the wham is when Jesus says, woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves, which people walk over without knowing it. And again, if you were either touched or walked over a grave as an Israelite during the Old Testament times, not today, but during those times, you would have been ceremonially unclean. And here they were unmarked, so people are doing it, and they don't even realize they're doing it. They are spiritual typhoid Marys, spreading the disease to everyone they come in contact with. Whoa, that is wham! Somebody went flying, okay? So we stopped last week and we just said, hey, what actually, at that moment when he was surprised, what made him better, holier than Jesus, who walked right on by the fountain there when they're cleaning, and we said it was his religion. It was his, and I defined religion, careful. I did not get a single email. Whew. That's the first time I've ever done that. Where did I get an email? That's really, now you're going, oh, I'll change that right now. But because I carefully defined it. And what I'm saying by religion is a set of beliefs and actions that when believed and performed, makes a person right with God. The absence of this belief and actions proves to a person and others that this person is not right with God, or to state it another way, religion operates on the principle of I obey, therefore I'm accepted. The gospel, the basic operating principle of the gospel, which is what Jesus is about, is I am accepted by God through the work of Jesus Christ. Therefore, I obey. It's not the absence of rules, okay? Don't hear that the gospel's the absence of rules, but they're not obligations. in the sense that if I do them, then I'm okay. No, I'm okay, and then I do that. I had a person tell me this week, they said, yeah, explain to me the God. I tell these pastors who are so, they write all these things about the gospel and the gospel this and the gospel that. I said, I cornered a couple of them and I said, tell me this, what does it mean to be gospel-centered? They couldn't do it. I said, I can do it in 4 words. Because first of all, I'm not very smart, so I can only use 4 words. I'm okay in Jesus. I'm okay in Jesus. That's it. That's the gospel. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're not okay because you're here. You can leave now if you're like, we already took the offering. Ooh, geez, that's really bad. No, that was, again, too soon. But you don't have to be here. You don't have to do, I'm okay in Jesus. That's the gospel. That's not religion. So with that said, we looked at the ways to respond to God, 2 of which are rejected, one of which is running away into all kinds of different immorality, but one is trying to be really good. I'm just going to be a really good person. I'm going to do all the right things and don't do all the wrong things, and I'm going to be that guy. And then God will accept me because I cleaned up my act. Those are the Pharisees and the people we're going to meet today. Those are those people. And guess what they get? They get rejected. It's the shock of the Bible that those people get rejected. Who gets accepted? Well, those who do want to know God, but they do it by acknowledging that they're helpless and hopeless. And the only thing they can do is trust in the finished work of Jesus Christ alone. Jesus welcomes those people, even people from way one who look really dirty. And you see that all over the Gospels. And it's the most thrilling thing, and it's the most thrilling thing today too. That those who are cleaned up and say they're all right sometimes will come and get bypassed by Jesus, and those whose lives are an absolute train wreck say, I just need Jesus, and Jesus welcomes them. So, with that said, that's a little bit of a recap this week. Round 2, ding, ding, here we go. You got it? Luke chapter 11, I hope your Bible's open, verses 45 to 54. Let's go ahead and read this together. One of the experts in the law answered him, Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also. I'll come back and explain it later. Jesus replied, and you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held accountable for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. When Jesus went outside, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. Okay, this week again, what we're talking about, last week we talked about the subtle poison of religion. This week we're talking about the danger of being right. That's where we're going to kind of hone in on this particular thing. I'm going to do the same thing I did last week. I'm going to walk through the passage. We're going to take a little freeze frame again, do that same kind of concept and ask the same question we did last week. What's actually going on in the mind of this particular individual? But with that said, you need to understand a little bit of what's happening in the account here. So let's just go back to this. And the question, remember, they're sitting around a table. This is just table talk, okay? This guy, one of the experts in the law, answered him. They say, Teacher, when you say those things, you're insulting us also. So the question is really like, do you realize what you're doing, Jesus? You're including us when you're saying that against the Pharisee type people. We're here, we can hear you too. All right? That's the question. Now, the first thing though, but let's just do a little bit of background here because you might not be familiar. It says the experts in the law. Literally, if you have a ESV Bible in front of you, or if you have a New American Standard or one of those, it'll say lawyer. One of the lawyers answered him. And I have too much to do today to give any lawyer jokes. But Question we want to ask are, there's many different phrases that are used for these folks. Lawyers, experts in the law, or they were called the scribes. You're going to see those interchangeably. It matters which version of the Bible you have, but sometimes you have all three in certain versions, okay? So they're going to be the same thing. All right, so let's take a look at who these scribes are. Well, first, let's do like we did last week. We've seen that these folks, teachers of the law, experts of the law, scribes, we've seen them already in Luke. Let's just take a couple places. Luke 5:21. Jesus forgives someone of their sins, and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law begin thinking to themselves, who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Right? God is the only one who can forgive sins. That's actually good theology, right? I can't forgive you of something that you didn't do against me, right? So that's true. But the first part of what they thought was, no, there's this Jesus speaking blasphemy because only God can forgive sin. Well, there's another possibility here. Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. Of course, that just blew their minds, so they're not there. Luke 6, we see it again. Jesus is doing something on the Sabbath. Now, if you're wondering what the Sabbath was, I'll get to that in just a minute. And it was supposed to be a day of rest. On another Sabbath, Jesus, he went into the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. Okay, so Jesus is teaching, and this is a perfect setup. So right there, somebody's sitting, and their hand is shriveled, and it's the Sabbath. It's right now going to happen. They're waiting, right? The Pharisees in teaching of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal that guy on the Sabbath. And I love what it says next. Jesus knew their thoughts and heals the guy. Booyah, right there, huh? I don't know if he said booyah, but... Okay, and then Luke 9. Jesus is talking to his disciples. It's the first time that they publicly will say who Jesus is. And it says, but what about you? Because Jesus asked first, who do other people say that I am? And they have all these opinions. And Jesus says, well, let's talk about you. Jesus is a master teacher. He's a great teacher. Who do you say that I am? And Peter answers, you're the Christ, or you're God's Messiah. And Jesus strictly warned them not to tell anyone, yet, of course. And he said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, the experts in the law, the teachers of the law, and he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. They're going to ultimately be the ones that kill Jesus. In fact, if you follow in the Gospel of Luke, it is these scribes are the ones that move, not as much the Pharisees in the Gospel of Luke. The Pharisees still have some run-ins with Jesus, but the scribes run his death. So that's who they are according to scriptures. Let's, a little bit of history here. This one is from John Nolan, who's written a commentary on the Word Biblical Commentary series. He says, the teachers of the law, the scribes or the lawyers, were the antecedents to the later Jewish rabbis and those of Pharisaic persuasion. Constituted a leadership group within the Pharisaic movement. The teachers of the law had a significant place in the political structure of Judea. Note their involvement alongside the chief priests in the final events in Jerusalem. The teachers of the law functioned both as scholars, so they were experts of the law and teachers, and also had a role in the administration of justice. So it's not unfair. I mean, it's not exactly right to say they were like a lawyer, but they weren't a lawyer in the classic. They were the people that viewed the Bible, they studied the Bible, they really were experts in it, and they're going to do one more thing here, and we'll show what that is in just a minute. We'll let the passage kind of dictate it. But they were the ones that really ruled as judge over other people in a sense of advocating for what they thought was the Bible. So remember the question? Are you including us? Jesus never even answers it, but if he did, it'd just be, yep, right? Because he just continues on. And to you experts in the law, woe to you. Okay, that's our fourth woe for those of you who are counting. That's our fourth woe. We're going to get two more. 3 to the Pharisees and 3 to the experts in the law. And you experts in the law, woe to you because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. So let's look at what he's saying here. What is that about? In order to do that, you have to understand a little bit of what the experts in the law, what one of their main functions was. Okay, let me read a little bit of history here from Kent Hughes. It's helpful for us to understand. The Pharisees were religionists, members of a religious party that enforced the legal code. The lawyers, scribes, or experts in the law, those three terms are interchangeable, were the codifiers of the law. The people who built hedges around it by encrusting it with myriads of extra regulations. They're the ones who wrote those. Jesus' woes to the Pharisees were swipes at their hypocritical religious practices, whereas the woes that fell on the lawyers had to do with the way they abused the Torah, God's word. The lawyers laden the people with laws manufactured from the sacred text, then designed to provide a protective crust for the law. Eventually, this crust became no less than 6,000 more laws that you had to follow. A smothering incrustation, okay? Now, one of the things, he goes on to talk about this in his book. He goes on to talk about the Sabbath. The Sabbath was one of their favorite things to have all these laws about. And so what they did is, in order to keep, what is the law, what the Old Testament says is, keep the Sabbath. You will work 6 days a week, but on the Sabbath, you shall not work. And so then everybody's like, oh, well, what really is work and what isn't work? And so the scribes, the experts, came up with 39 categories. One more would have been even 40, but 39 categories, and they're going to go over this. And here's what it is. For example, one of the 39 categories forbade the carrying of burdens on the Sabbath. Wow. And hedged it with minute prohibitions for every occasion. This section declared that anything equal to or heavier than a dried fig. Dried fig. How dry? I don't know. Today they put a digital scale on it or something, but so it was permissible to carry something that weighed less than a dried fig on the Sabbath. But if you accidentally put it down and then picked it up, that would have counted as doubling the weight. Somehow. And thus breaking the Sabbath. Ooh, snap, I dropped it. Could you pick that up and throw it and stick it? Oh, no. I said, Mom, I'm bringing home a dried fig. And now I'm not. Let me read from the actual, let me read from the Mishnah, which is the book they wrote. And again, you can see how utterly restrictive this is. On the Sabbath, if a man carries a burden in his right hand or in his left hand, in his bosom or on his shoulder, he is culpable. For this last was the manner of carrying of the sons of Korah. If he took it out on the back of his hand, or with his foot, or with his mouth, or with his elbow, or in his ear, or in his hair, or in his wallet, it carried mouth downwards, or between his wallet and on his shirt, or in the hem of his shirt, or in his shoe, or in his sandal, he is not culpable, since he is not taken out after them who have taken out of the fashion of them that take it out as a burden. Wow. That's what Jesus says. That's what Jesus says you're doing. You are loading down rules. You're making religious rules so people are focusing on the minutia of the religious rules instead of remembering at all that your heavenly Father gave you a day of rest. You've totally forgotten that. You're just trying to focus on what's okay and what's not okay. That's woe number one. Woe number two. You are in a long line of rejectors. That's the BAM. Okay, we had POW, and now we have BAM. And he says, guess what? You guys, you build tombs for the prophets. That's kind of nice. Think about this for just a second, though. Who actually killed the prophets? Oh, your great-great-great-granddaddy. Your great-great-great-granddaddy, I can't say that, granddaddy. They're the ones that killed the prophets. Okay, well, it's nice of you. You testify then that you approve what they did because you build the tombs. All right? Now they would have said, no, we're not doing that. We build these tombs and we try to find their bones and we put them in there. That's what they would have said. But Jesus, knowing, he continues. He says, God in his wisdom said, and this is now either a phrase that was known to them or it's one where Jesus is quoting the Father. It's not in the Bible. It says, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others they will persecute. What's he talking about? Well, he's talking about right now. Right now. John the Baptist, how'd that go? You guys think you're open to prophets? I just sent you one. J the B, how'd that go? You don't like him. You just go ahead about 10 chapters in the book we're writing right now in Luke. You're going to see what happens there too. And then how about my apostles, the ones in the book of Acts? How are they going to fare with you guys? Not so good. So then he says this, therefore, this generation, y'all right here? So the only thing the South is good for is that word, by the way, that NASCAR. Y'all right here in my hearing, you're going to be held responsible for all the prophets from those days to today. You think you honor them? You honor them. No, you don't. From the beginning, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah. Now that's really cool in English because it's A to Z, but it's not in the original language. But it's cool how Jesus would know that when by saying that we'd someday put this into English. No, it's not. It's not. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. I've had people come up to me and tell me that. They say, oh man, you don't read from the King James Bible. It's like, well, no, I like the King James Version, except it's a little old. You know, it's hard to understand at times. It's like, well, that's the Word of God. It's like, really? Yeah, the Word of God, King James Bible in English. Oh, and then literally, if it's good enough for the Apostle Paul, it's good enough for me. It's like, you think Paul spoke? Oh, dear. Anyway, they're probably from a state which will be named in just a moment. So he's just saying, from the first murder ever done, Abel, right? Genesis chapter 4, all the way to Zechariah. And there's some confusion if that's Zechariah of the Old Testament. Some people think it's the Zechariah of Luke. Very, 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 very few. I would tend to think he's talking about the Old Testament. And they say this, listen, you're going to be held for all of that. Why? Because someone way greater and far better than him is here. John the Baptist and I, we're here, and our followers are here, and you're going to completely reject them too. Guess what? You're experts? You're experts of the Bible? You kill the people who God, the author of the Bible, sent you. I like what T.W. Manson says about, they killed the prophets, you make sure they stay dead. Third and last woe, or sixth if you're counting them all together. He says, woe to you experts in the law, because you have, and here is the wham. Woe to you experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you hinder those who were entering. Yeah, it was a rough day for Gopher Nation yesterday, right? Rough day for Gopher Nation. Carol and I, we decided to take our motorcycle and go by the stadium. Oh my gosh, we were completely caught in the traffic, and we saw a lot of people with the ends on their shirts. I mean, tons of them. Finally, I just yelled at a guy, "What does that stand for?" And he said, "Knowledge." I know, scoreboard. I get it. It's just too easy, though. This quote that Jesus says to the experts of the law completely reminds me, 100% reminds me of Billy Madison, right? If you're familiar with this quote. Billy Madison is on a game show, and the guy, he says something really stupid, and the guy answers, the game show host answers, what you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. And do you remember what Adam Sandler says? This is Billy Madison. He says, "A simple incorrect would have sufficed," you know. But that's what Jesus is saying to these guys. You experts in the law, you'd make everybody dumber. Everybody is dumber in the room because you just opened your mouth. That is wham. There's fighting words. Big time. What are you saying? Are you saying that too much education can actually lead a person away from God or away from the Bible? I am saying that. It's when I went to seminary, there's a nickname for seminary. Anybody? Cemetery. Because they've watched people go there and grow cold to God. Oh, I know all this stuff. I know original languages. Well, la-ti frickin' da. Karl Barth says it this, and I love this. He says, the Bible is like a love letter and should be read in the same way. If the letter is written in a foreign language, the lover will need to decipher it with the aid of a dictionary. But he will regard the toil of translation as an irritating delay to the reading of the letter. Oh, I know Greek. I don't care. A necessary evil, and he will certainly not imagine that he is reading the letter while he is still translating it. Therefore, and like Karl Barth, he just goes all King James on you now. Just woof, here it comes. It's written in the 1940s and 50s. It says, if thou art a learned man, then take care lest with all thy erudite, which means learned, he uses a big word even to say it, reading thou forgettest, perchance, to read God's word. This leads us then to dinner's over. Jesus just taken everybody at the table, the Pharisees and the experts in the law, and completely given them one how you doing after another on what they either believe to be their morality and to be better, or that they think better. Jesus went outside, the Pharisees, so Jesus goes out and they're sitting at the table going, okay, that ain't gonna happen anymore, no more. And so they're gonna besiege Jesus with questions and they wanted to catch him. From this time on, they are opposed to him completely and they are plotting to finally crucify him. Starts right here. Okay, now, amazing passage. Let's go back to do what we did last week. We went back to that, the moment when the Pharisee was surprised. What's going on in his mind? I want to do that same freeze frame thing again. I want to freeze the frame this time on what is going on in the mind of the scribe when he's offended at Jesus' harsh words to the Pharisee. And he says, Jesus, when you say those things, that's hitting us too. And Jesus, remember, he just keeps going. He just keeps going. So like, you've interpreted correctly. Very good. I was hoping that you'd be offended. But let me get specifically to you and offend you. So what was it that made the scribes so offended? And it wasn't that they thought they were better than Jesus morally. They thought they were smarter than Jesus. You don't understand. You don't understand, Jesus. I'm an expert. I know the original language. Oh, I guess we're speaking it, so it's not a big deal. But I know all this stuff. I've studied. I've been to school. Carpenter. Right? Now, there's two kinds of arrogance. There's two kinds of arrogance. I think a lot of people miss this. One kind of arrogance is where you actually think you're better than other people based on your behavior and that you're kind of a big deal, right? Kind of a big deal. You know, people know me, right? That guy. But the second kind of arrogance is this, and it's the fact that you're right and everybody else is wrong. In other words, it's being too certain of something this side of heaven. There's only one person who walked this earth can have that kind of certainty, and that is Jesus. So then I will have disdain towards people who disagree with me on whatever. If you don't believe me, just open Facebook right now and read, right? Because I'm right and you're wrong. So what I want to talk about in the remainder of our little time here is what is this passage saying to us? If we say to ourselves, I'm sure I'm not glad like the Pharisee, I'm sure I'm not glad like the scribe, you just became them because you're saying you're better and you're smarter than the scribe. Just outed yourself, right? We want to ask the question, there's a danger in being right all the time. What does that look like? Now, in order to do that, those of you who are philosophy majors, admittedly, I'm going to butcher this. This is extreme, putting into 3 seconds what, has taken millennia to really think about. But I want to talk about the difference between modernism and postmodernism, or what some say modernity and postmodernity, okay? So modernism is a way of thinking, it's a Western way of thinking primarily, where it begins with, anybody know the author of modernism? Descartes, right? And Descartes, actually it's fascinating, Descartes actually is struggling with his belief in God. And he says, what do I know for sure? He says, I don't know what I know for sure, but I do know this. I'm struggling to know that if anything is real. Maybe it's all the Matrix. I don't know what's going on. He says, what do I know for sure? The thing that I know for sure is that I doubt everything. And therefore, if I doubt everything, I am having that thought. So therefore, in the famous phrase, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. Now from that, Descartes, in his defense, he takes just that one simple principle and establishes a proof of the existence of God and who Jesus is. Okay, really, that's who Descartes is. But you got to understand, modernism goes back to the I. I think, therefore I am, right? It starts with me. In other words, there is absolute truth, but I'm the one that is the sole, I can't even look to other people. I'm the one that the sole proprietor of understanding that absolute truth. It rests with me whether or not I grasp that truth or not. Well, postmodernity, and people say it's been around since if you look at the streams of postmodernism, what are words and different things like that. But it goes back to Pilate. When Jesus says, when Jesus is before Pilate, and Jesus says, anyone who's on the side of truth understands what I'm talking about. And what are Pilate's words? He says, what is truth, right? So postmodernity says, okay, all you modernists are saying that there is absolute truth, but that you have to go and find it. Well, if that's true, how come there's 67 different understandings of things? I just want to know, am I supposed to drink red wine or not, right? Am I supposed to smoke cigarettes? In the 1920s, they gave that to you if you were an asthmatic. Not anymore, right? They probably will again later. Who knows? There's things that we think we know, but maybe not. And the postmodernists say it's ridiculous. Stop looking after absolute truth. The postmodernist says it doesn't exist. So the best we can do is try to figure things out together. Truth lies in the community. All right? So if you're a modernist or a postmodernist and you're a follower of Jesus, neither one is really your friend. You're wishing, I wish I'd go back to the good old days. That's not good, because then I have to prove to you things that I can't prove. Like, okay, you say God created the world, prove it. Do it again, right? That's the only way to prove it. And if we did it again, you'd go, lucky, do it again, right? That's modernism. Postmodernism says, whatever, nice trick, do it again, I don't care, right? So neither one of those are our friends. But let me tell you what is our friend. See, I'm much more of a postmodernist than I am a modernist, in the sense that I did not coin this term. It's called soft postmodernism. What soft postmodernism says is this: there is absolute truth. Absolutely. But I, as a human being, will never have absolute knowledge of that truth. And to use a graph, engineer types, graph, oh boy, we saw a graph in church, must be cool, says that as ignorance goes less ignorance, which means more knowledge, and the time that I go over and pursue truth, I will, like an asymptote, keep going, asymptote will go, but never touch it. Therefore, I need others around me, right? I need others around. I'm not omniperspectival. Jesus is. I have a perspective. I need others around me. That's soft postmodernism. It is our friend, big time. It is our friend. Let me give a couple examples of this that are just way too much fun. Okay, so first of all, there's this guy, the original hipster, John Calvin, right? He is the original hipster. Look at that thing, huh? And John Calvin comes on the scene, and his followers after him. He writes these things called Institute of the Christian Religion. He's a reformer. He writes all these different things. He never coined the phrase tulip, ever. His followers did, not John, okay? And it stands for a system, a way of thinking about the Christian faith in some of the things that were being hotly debated at the time. In other words, it stands for total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. Now, I'm gonna, what it basically means is that, I'm gonna explain it later. I am a Calvinist. I didn't choose it. Anyway. And if you're not, you were predestined not to, so it's okay. I am a Calvinist. I believe in Reformed theology. That's what it means. I believe in tulip. I came to a point and said, I think this fundamentally is a great way to look at the scriptures and a great way to understand how the gospel of grace actually works itself into our lives. However, I have been around a lot of people who have come to the place of Calvinism, and they use it as a club against other people. For instance, I was with a group of interns, and many of them would graduate from, I won't name any names in any places, but they graduate from certain places, and over about a 3 or 4 year period of their lives, they wrestled through the rough issue of the sovereignty of God and how predestination, all of that fits. 3 or 4 years. Some of them, they're so deeply philosophical, theological, would spend nights just not able to sleep and all that. And then they become pastors, and they go into, La Center, Minnesota, where the folks there are just thinking about, what they're going to do this week. And the next 5 weeks is TULIP. Open your mouth, wham, jam it right down your throat. Well, my people don't get it. How long did it take you? Well, 3 years, and you're pretty smart, right? I mean, you're kind of into this stuff. They're not. Maybe give them, 3 years in a day. Maybe. 2 weeks ago, as I already had planned this sermon, I saw this particular website. Early warning signs of adult onset Calvinism. And I just got to read this to you. This is too classic. He says, this is by Stephen Altrich, who's actually a Calvinist, okay? So he says this: approximately 1 out of every 4 Christians will encounter adult onset Calvinism, commonly known as AOC, during their life, either personally or in someone close to them. It can be a scary thing to encounter, especially if you're not familiar with the symptoms. The person you once knew and loved is suddenly a completely different person. Don't panic, it gets better. To help you navigate the treacherous waters of AOC, I've listed the possible symptoms you may encounter. A sudden urge to correct everything and everyone all the time about every possible thing. A growing conviction that every worship song you ever sung is heretical and should be excised from the church catalog, including the Nicene Creed, doxology, and most of the Psalms. A strange and inexplicable ability to listen to 300 John Piper sermons in a single day. A burning passion to convert everyone, especially your extremely godly parents, who taught you the Bible, his words, his caps, to Calvinism. A growing level of arrogance that is directly inverse to the number of blog posts you write about humility. Constant cravings for cigars and microbrews, even though they make you incredibly sick. Now that one you just need to keep. I'm just gonna, anyway. Deep suspicion of anything that might cause the slightest bit of emotion in church, especially those awful worship songs noted above. Deep-seated cynicism toward anyone who does not take a hard stance on an issue, including but not limited to free will, Calvinism, sports, coffee, the Trinity, capitalism, child schooling, and dating. Being so smug that you begin to panic, you won't be able to adequately manifest all the smugness. An unshakable conviction that Tim Keller is theologically too soft. The ability to bring every conversation full circle to Romans 9. Frustration that guys like Piper and Sproul don't draw more lines in the sand. inevitably arriving at the conclusion that John Calvin was not that strong of a Calvinist. Growing a beard, but not in a hipster way. This beard is way different from hipster beards because it tapers to a point somewhere between the nipples, just like Calvin's beard did. If you or someone you know begins experiencing these symptoms, go to a pastor immediately. I wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference because you are predestined to be a Calvinist, but still, you should probably see a pastor. But don't worry, after 5 or 6 years, these symptoms will subside and you and your loved one will return to being a mostly normal person. Until then, sorry. You can be very, very dangerous with the truth. You can be very, very dangerous with the truth. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, you can use this as a club or you can use this as a way of expressing to others care and love. Let me give you an example of this. Let me tell you Calvinism, 2 passes at giving this flower. Let me give you the first one. This is the hardcore way. You're wicked. There's nothing you can do about it. You know what? Jesus might have not even really died for you because you're wicked. And so his sin, he might not have. But if you do come to Jesus, it'll be because you don't want to. You just come kicking and screaming. And then you got to work really hard at staying in that club because believe me, it's hard. Some of you have had that pressed down on you in the form of that's Christianity. I'm saying that's not anywhere near Christianity. Let me give you the second pass. Notice the letters are all the same. One says this, God did not make the world evil. God made the world beautiful. We don't start with total depravity. We start with beauty and wonder and meaning and purpose and a relationship with God. But through choice, sin enters the world and mars everything we do. Every area of my life is tainted by sin. Not that everything I do is as evil as it could be, but every area is tainted by sin and has effect in everything. Economics, sexuality, finances. I guess I said that twice, but everything. It has effects. And do you realize that there's nothing that you need to do in order to come to Jesus Christ? You don't have to get cleaned up. You don't have to get cleaned up at all. It's all based on what Christ did on the cross. It's all based on the fact that he loves you that much, that he went to the cross. And he's working in people's lives to bring them to himself. And Christ's death is completely sufficient for everyone who chooses to believe in him. It's sufficient for all, but only effective for those who ultimately will believe. And which means that, here's what it means, what the I means, is that out of all the world, you see all the options. God has opened your eyes to see everything, all the beautiful flavors at Baskin-Robbins, and you will choose the Jesus flavor. Why? Because you have to, no, but because you get to, because your eyes are open to see that's the best flavor. It's completely irresistible. And it's not about preservation, you got to work hard. It's about God preserving you. It's about a God who works in your life and brings people around in situations to preserve you. He loves you way more than you could ever imagine. And he's with you every moment, carrying you along. That's Calvinism. That's my Calvinism. If you're the first Calvinist, yee. That's scary. Listen, this whole idea of being right has made the church the mockery of many outside the church. If you Google the greatest religious joke of all time, up will come Emo Phillips. It's been voted on by several people, the greatest religious joke of all time. I don't tell many jokes. I'm going to read this joke to you. Here we go. Emo Phillips. Emo's really kind of strange. He kind of talks like this. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read it, but that's the way he kind of talks. And he says, I was walking across a bridge the other day, and I saw a man standing on the edge, about to jump off. So I ran over and said, stop, don't do it. Why shouldn't I, he said. I said, well, there's so much to live for. He said, like what? He said, well, are you religious or atheist? He said, religious. Me too. Are you Christian or Buddhist? He said, Christian. I said, me too. Are you Catholic or Protestant? He said, Protestant. Me too. Are you Episcopalian or Baptist? He said, Baptist. I said, wow, me too. Are you Baptist Church of God or Baptist Church of the Lord? He said, Baptist Church of God. I said, me too. Are you Original Baptist Church of God or are you Reformed Baptist Church of God? He said, Reformed Baptist Church of God. I said, me too. Are you Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation 1879, or Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation of 1915? He said, Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation of 1915. I said, die, heretic scum, and I pushed him off the bridge. I tell that joke for a reason, not just to tell jokes. Is that us? Is that how people see us? Is that how people see you? Is this how people see you in your office? Is this how people who aren't followers of Jesus yet would see you? Do we do this crazy thing called listening? Do we do this crazy thing called just asking a question saying, help me to understand why you would think that Christianity isn't true? I'm intrigued by that. So it doesn't mean that I can't disagree with someone. Of course I can. Do we have to be right like the expert in the law? Let's pray together.